I'm with you. God, now I got to be careful what I say.
Are you okay with that? I should have
Of
asked you.
course, yeah, I'm fine with it. Yeah. So I came to have more of a conversation with you than to deliver a talk that's written and uninterrupted, so to speak. And the conversation that I came to have with you is called Dancing with Our Anger. And I don't know about you, but anger has presented untold opportunities for practice for me, off and on throughout my entire life. You know, we all grapple with our own karma. We all grapple with our own koans. We come into this life with our own set of unique challenges and opportunities that we're tasked with trying to sort out and muddle through. And some of us grapple with the anger of koan, others less so. But I happen to be among the people who have grappled with the koan of anger off and on throughout my life. And I'm curious, by just show of hands, how many of you, like me, have found dancing with your anger to be a fruitful field for practice in this go around? I think that one of the things that really interests me about this topic is that when we think about the commercialization of Buddhism in the West, we think about the stereotype. We think about the popular image in books and movies and commercials and Martha Stewart decorating brochures and home improvement stores and home furnishing stores and posters that you can buy at Walmart. The commercialized image of Buddhist practitioners, stereotypically, is one of constant, never-ending equanimity and calm and repose and groundedness, soft-spokenness. And I don't know about you, but that is not my life. My life sometimes has moments of calm and quiet and soft-spokenness and groundedness and tremendous equanimity. But those are often interrupted by lots of angst, challenges, irritations, frustrations. It shouldn't be, I wish it were, why is it? That can get me worked up in a moment's notice. So my reality as a Buddhist practitioner is a lot messier than the stuff that I see stereotyped about us as practitioners. I also like this topic because I think sometimes some Buddhist centers and some Buddhist teachers might inadvertently, indirectly, with all good intent, promulgate that stereotype. Encourage it, reinforce it, feed into it, which I don't think serves any of us particularly well. So I like this topic because to me it's real and authentic and urgent. And it also gives us something to kind of push against and poke at in terms of our spiritual practice, which I think is always beneficial. So I'm going to share a couple of things that for me are kind of critical grounding teachings. These are the 16 Bodhisattva precepts that are listed up on Wy'East's website. And I think you are in the middle of precept study as we speak, or you have been, or you will be. And we know these to be pretty familiar. And among the 10 grave precepts, and these are all plenty loaded, is this one. Do not indulge anger. And instead, cultivate equanimity. How familiar is this precept to you? So I find this precept fascinating, and I know it's an interpretation of it, a translation of an interpretation of a translation, as are all Buddhist teachings. But I have always been drawn to the word indulge. Do not indulge anger. When I look at this teaching, I don't see an admonition that I may not feel angry. What I read is an admonition that I not indulge that. I don't see anything about it that says that I should not experience, that I should try to avoid, that I should feel bad about or guilty about encountering the very human, very natural emotion called anger. What I'm taught is that what I do with anger, how I dance with my anger, how I respond to my anger, how I either let it run its course or instead fuel it and stoke it and fan it and coddle it, is the key. To me, this is just more verification that as Buddhists, our task is not to not feel certain ways, including angry. Our task isn't to move through the world as robots that don't feel or don't respond or don't react. Our task or calling isn't to kind of float through on a cloud that is ethereal and detached from reality. In fact, our task is to meet whatever the moment is fully and wholly and authentically in the moment. My teacher used to say, if you're angry, your job is to be angry. If you're encountering great grief in your life, your task is to grieve. If you're encountering extraordinary joy and happiness and celebration, your task is to feel joy and celebration. The task is to meet whatever is, to greet it, to let it be whatever it is, and not try to make it be not that, or not something, not that, but something different. So when I think about this precept and I think about my teacher's teaching, anger was, in my instruction, normalized, wholly predictable, part and parcel of what I could expect to be part of my emotional and mental life, my entire human journey. No guilt, no shame, No need to be other than that. So I'm going to stop, and I have more to say, but I just want to stop and check in and see how that resonates for you or doesn't resonate for you.
For me, what's coming up for me is when you talk about experiencing joy, we can be reactionary to that. We can celebrate, we can dance, we can giggle and laugh, be vocal, show our joy. If we're grieving, we're told it's okay to cry, to be sorrowful, to show our emotions, to crawl into a hole if we need to, etc. Anger, on the other hand, we can experience it, but don't indulge it. Don't be vocal about it. Don't show how angry you are. Don't scream at somebody. If we're joyful, we can laugh at the top of our lungs and interrupt the whole room and be okay with that. But if we are angry, that is not okay to be loud with that anger and show our anger. So that is what's coming up for me.
Interesting. So interesting that you are thinking about this, the word indulge as showing or manifesting. So to manifest or show something, show your joy, show your grief, that is indulging it, you're saying. But somehow to do that with anger is not okay in Buddhist land, or not hip in a Sangha context, or that's the message that we get. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
How else is this resonating for anybody else?
I'd say it says notice the anger, and the indulgence is to actually notice that before you act on it, and then take. I would say it's maybe this ain't Buddhist, but I'd say go ahead and act on it, but don't harm anybody while you're doing it, yourself or anybody else.
Okay. So yours is a vote for act on it or manifest it or show it if that's authentic in the moment. Just be mindful of doing that in a way that is not injurious or harmful to other people as best you can. And
this rolls on down the pike too. So,
okay.
The further ahead you can think about wise, skillful action. That I've ever heard that phrase.
Yeah, all right, action, sure. Skillful means.
But I think it's a call to action often, and you've got to act it out.
Okay. Anybody else have a thought about this, or a reaction to this, or a response to this as we talk about it?
So I noticed, I'm not that angry of a person, but once in a while some anger flares up. But I notice it doesn't really last very long. It's just like a little spark. And then if it somehow feels good in my tummy or something, then I'll feed it by telling myself that story over and over again about how terrible that person was and they treated me wrong. And that's how I see indulging it, is like that spark is pretty short-lived, really. It's just like boom, and then move on. But if I like it well enough, then I'll indulge it just by retelling that story and telling other people about it too.
Anybody else have a thought or response as you kind of sit with this and reflect on it?
Yeah, I have a vote with Shokai on the, and I almost believe that this is something with, maybe this is the way we should be with all of our emotions. I don't know. The whole idea of just, obviously you're going to feel anger, because we're humans, but and I think it's okay to act on the anger, but I think it's important to act on it with wisdom and just kind of, because the other part of the precept talks about not advancing and not retreating. And I think that that is kind of all about just sort of standing your ground and just waiting to see what the right, correct reaction is to the anger.
So interesting. So advancing might be indulging, kind of pushing and prodding and moving forward and adding to and advancing. And retreating could be, I shouldn't, I can't, I mustn't, this isn't right. I kind of the opposite of that. And maybe your read is right on the money. Maybe it's just kind of being with it in the moment and neither advancing nor retreating. Maybe I just made that up. Maybe you made it.
That's sounds good to me too.
Sounds great to me. I think there is here's a thought for you. So as we kind of move on a little bit, I think that in my understanding of what my teacher taught me was that indulge didn't mean show. That if I showed joy, I was indulging joy. If I showed anger, I was indulging anger. I wasn't taught that the mere expression of it was to indulge it. And so therefore I should not express it. I was taught more like Emily, that indulging it was to feed it, to fan it, to inflame it, to stoke it, to add additional layers to it, to bring it out of memory, plop it down again, coddle it, stroke it, bring it back to life, remind myself of it, that was indulging it. But to be angry, to show that I am irritated or that I am frustrated or that I am angry in a moment is no more wrong or inappropriate or un-Buddhist than to laugh or to cry in those moments.
Yeah, Thomas, I guess I was thinking about what Sean said, and then you just said something about to laugh, and I guess you could, when you laugh too much and become obnoxious and laughing, but yeah, I had never thought about it the way Sean explained it or said she reacted to it. And I thought, I sort of feel like that too. Like it's okay to be as joyful as you want to be for as long as you want to be, and express that however you want. I think I can't think of a time when joy is indulged. So I guess I'm thinking the anger, maybe we don't know how to handle, I don't know. Then the word indulge with joy does not hit me the same way as indulge with anger.
I think we're taught not just with things that we think are negative or bad, like anger. I think even with things that we label as good or pleasing or pleasant, like joy, I think the teaching is similar, that it is what it is, that we greet it fully and wholly as we experience it. But even with the good stuff, that we don't heap additional layers on it, we don't stoke it, we don't try to be greedy with it, we don't try to keep it alive longer than the natural course it would take. We don't try to kind of cling to it and, oh my God, this feels so great, I don't ever want it to go away. We don't make up all kinds of stories about it, that we don't do any of those things with our positive emotion any more than we do with our negative emotion. So I think in that regard, the teaching is the same, but I also agree that we have decided, I think, that there are some emotional reactions that are permissible to manifest and others that we are discouraged from manifesting. And I guess my question of you is, where does that come from? Was that Shakyamuni who taught that? That it was okay to feel positive things, but it was not okay to feel negative things? I mean, does that come out of the Pali Canon? Did he preach that from some mountaintop? I don't think he did. I think that's us. I think that's part of our story about anger. I think that's our fear of anger. I think that's our dance, not necessarily teaching from the Buddha. So here's another thought, just to complicate things a little more for you. So I want to share briefly this story of Shantideva. How many of you have heard of Shantideva or read any of Shantideva, studied Shantideva? A handful of you. So Shantideva was an 8th century Common Era Indian philosopher, monk, poet, and scholar, and he studied at the University of Nalanda, which in its day was this internationally renowned site of scholarship and study. It was predominantly Buddhist, but there was curriculum there that was not just Buddhist, all kinds of science and philosophy and literature. And Shantideva was, and it was a monastic university, so there were 10,000 monks who lived there and studied there at any one time, we think. And Shantideva was viewed as a real B-team player, not a real high performer there. In fact, he was so disrespected by his fellow students at Nalanda that they joked that the only 3 things he was good for was to eat and sleep and ship. That's how disrespected he was. So they were going to catch him and really show him up. So he was challenged to deliver a teaching. And they thought when they issued this challenge to him that he would just muddle his way through it and embarrass himself and just confirm what a dolt he was. This was really engineered to embarrass him. And he accepted the challenge. And as the story is told, the teaching he delivered absolutely blew everybody away and became one of the most influential texts in what would become the development of Mahayana Buddhism. So the old adage about don't judge a book by its cover certainly applies to Shantideva and this teaching. And the teaching is called The Way of the Bodhisattva. It's divided up into 10 chapters. And one of the chapters, chapter 6, is entitled Patience. And when you read it, it's, to me, less about patience, and it is overwhelmingly about anger and our dance with anger and the power of anger as a uniquely corrosive poison. So I have this up on the screen. Would anybody read 1 through 3?
Okay. 1 through 3.
Mm-hmm.
All the good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity and offerings to the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them. No evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourselves, therefore, in patience, in various ways insistently. Those tormented by the pain of anger never know the tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. They will neither sleep nor feel secure.
So this entire teaching, not just this chapter, is filled with and characterized by very effusive speech. So, for example, Shantideva does not just say, be careful about your anger. He doesn't write that. He writes that all the good works gathered into 1,000 ages, a single flash of anger shatters them. This is very dramatic, very effusive, deliberately provocative language, where he is really determined to make a point. No evil is there similar to anger. Very dramatic statement. Would someone read 4 through 6? Anyone? Great.
Yes. Even those dependent on their Lord for gracious gifts of honor and of wealth will rise again and slay a master who is filled with wrath and hate. His family and friends he grieves and is not served by those his gifts attract. Not one is there, all in all, who, being angry, lives at ease. All these ills are brought about by wrath, our sorrow-bearing enemy. But those who seize and crush their anger down will find their joy in this and future lives.
So more drama. All these ills are brought about by wrath. And he describes wrath as our sorrow-bearing enemy. And our task is to seize it and crush it down so that we will find joy in this life and in our future lives. So again, deliberately effusive, very dramatic, intentionally provocative, and largely poetic. And finally, would somebody read number 7?
I can. Getting what I do not want and all that hinders my desire. In discontent, my anger finds its fuel. From this, it grows and beats me down.
So think about the times that you have gotten angry or felt anger or experienced anger or danced with anger in the recent past. Think about what for you those triggers are, what those buttons are, what those hot, sticky points are. And Shantideva posits that often there are 2 things underneath. Things come our way we do not want. And the other is that what we want and seek is hindered and obstructed. And that those 2 things are the discontent that fuels our anger. So when you think about getting what I do not want, that could be getting a diagnosis, getting bad news, getting an unexpected bill that's huge, that's throwing me for a loop, getting some kind of interpersonal entanglement that complicates my life, being the recipient of someone else's anger or displeasure or something about me. It's receiving things I do not want. And the other is my desires being hindered. I want health. I want to be able to travel again. I want COVID to be over. I want my brother to be nicer to me. I want my nephew to be more kind. I want to make more money. I want my temple to be more like this and less like that. I want my friends to pay more attention. I want Trump out of office. I want people in Afghanistan to be saved. I seek, I desire, I want. And when that's hindered or obstructed, that is often the discontent, the dis-ease, the dissatisfaction that then fuels my anger. Just like getting stuff I don't want. I think Shantideva is saying to us in a very deliberate way, wake up to the power of anger. Wake up to the potential poison that anger presents. Be thoughtful and be mindful that great things can be undone quickly in moments of wrath or hate or bitterness or anger. That things can get deconstructed quickly, that injury can be inflicted relatively easily. And just to recognize that there is a unique poison in anger that is often at the root of our dissatisfaction and our own suffering and the suffering we create for others. Now, do I believe literally that all of the good and all of the merit I've accumulated through 1,000 years of lifetimes are shattered in a single instant of anger? I hope not. Because if that's true, all good things I've ever done have been shattered over and over and over. But whether or not that's true, the teaching and the admonition is, Thomas, be careful. Thomas, wake up. Pay attention to this. This is powerful stuff, this anger. I have one other thought, and then I want to just entertain how this has resonated with you or not. The teaching about anger, whether it's in the precepts or whether it's Shantideva or whether it came out of the Pali Canon or anywhere else, does not differentiate between good anger and bad anger. It does not differentiate between righteous anger or unrighteous anger. It does not give me a pass because I'm on the right side of an issue. So therefore, my anger is somehow justified and worthy of indulging, whereas their anger, because they're on the wrong side of an issue or history, is not worthy of indulging. Mine is. There's no pass. There's no differentiation. Which, as a lifetime activist for lots of different causes, I find incredibly humbling. But I also think it's true. It feels true to me in my bones. That if I'm raging and fighting and filled with wrath in the name of kindness, no pass. if I'm inflicting injurious outcomes on people in the name of justice, nah, doesn't pass. I don't know about you, but I find that particularly humbling and challenging as I dance with my own anger, especially when I am completely convinced in my rightness. And sometimes I'm not just right like this, I'm right like this. And I think Buddhism teaches against that, regardless of the circumstances, or where we fall on a continuum, or the rightness of our view. I think it says to us, do not indulge anger. So, what do you think?
Thanks so much, Thomas, for I know you're helping me remember all the wonderful teachings from Kyogen about anger. And I remember just a lot, you're triggering a lot of things. One, I do remember him talking about, I think it was measure 9. That was the, what was that? Anti-gay marriage. It was just a terrible,
Some awful thing.
An awful thing. But I remember really taking to heart him talking about, like, it's okay, and actually is, right action to be passionate, to get out there, to fight for justice and what is right, and be non-attached to outcome. To be wholehearted, and then be open-handed with what happens next, and then meet it again, and then be open-handed. And it's so hard to do that because you're passionate. So there is a self that becomes created around that I am right and you are wrong. And I have created a self that is very concrete and permanent, and to let that go and let the self that I am be moved and changed by what happens, what arises, and all that activity. Anyway, so hard to do, but you're also reminding me of when I first started being at Dharma Rain, and I volunteered, and I was like in the office with Kyogen, and him like swearing just a blue streak at the computer, and
I got mad.
And
got
how
real mad.
shocked I was, and how that just blew my circuits about exactly what you're saying about, like, this is like the abbot, and he's like coming, he's like losing it. And then, it was just so clean because it was done, and it wasn't like he's going to carry that into dinner conversation or the next thing, or even if I interrupt him with a question, but it was an enormous Dharma teaching, him and the computer, because it seemed like there's always something going wrong with the computers. But anyway, and just what a good, what a shock that was for me, and to that is a different model of how we can have it arise, and it's fine. It's fine in that sense. So thanks for that. And on a personal note, I kind of come from the anger suppression school of, so my issue has not been necessarily outwardly indulging it, but actually being brave enough to express it when it's arising in as wise a way that I can, or a skillful way. So better. It's like there's sometimes where it is the thing to do to express it. It is not the thing to do to be like, I'm gonna be just chill about what's happening, or I'm not going to say anything because that's creating waves. So for me, the continual effort is to be able to express what is, even if it's uncomfortable for me or the person hearing it. So anyway, that's a lifetime challenge for me. So thank you for.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anybody else?
But I'm thinking of little kids and how how they are like 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds, and how they get so mad about something, and then the next minute they're laughing, and anyone with little grandkids or little kids in their lives can relate to that.
I have a brother who is relatively quick-tempered, and still to this day, I find it a little disarming, because I judge it in the moment. I'm like, well, that was not necessary. You should have done that. The difference with him is he's over it way before I'm over it. So what's indulging anger? Expressing his anger in the moment and manifesting it and making it very clear that he's angry with me? Or is it indulging anger for me to sit on it, let it stew, feel bad about it, judge him for it, say I was right, he was wrong, I did it better than he did, he should have done it, and let that kind of percolate for 2 or 3 days? Who's indulging anger in that scenario? I don't know. Great question. Great question. Anybody else? And isn't the wonderful, beautiful, nuanced, inspiring thing, and the maddening thing about this practice that it's kind of both and? On one hand, our teaching is wake up to whatever's in front of you, meet your life wholly, fully, authentically, experience completely what is in front of you. Good, bad, and different. Go for it, lean into it, turn toward it. And don't indulge anger. And recognize the unique poisonous nature of anger. Kind of my experience over 18 years of Buddhist practice. Yes to that, and yes to that. Yes here, yes over there. Both and. I'm looking at time. I think we're at time. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for letting me think out loud with you about this topic. And I hope that as you just let it resonate or percolate or reflect on it, that you find all kind of juicy, meaty, clear, and complicated stuff in it. And I hope your dance with anger is just a wonderful, fantastic, rich dance, always.
Thank you so much, Thomas. It's great.
So would you like to give us a closing verse, or are you comfortable doing that usually, or Shintai could do that?
I can do that.
Yes, thank you.
Do not indulge anger.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Thomas. It was just an incredibly rich talk tonight. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Definitely going to percolate for a while.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody. Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.